So welcome back to OG Dad Off the Record. I am your host, the OG Dad himself. And today is Sunday, and I have just finished up celebrating the last of my birthday celebration. I am the age of 37, which makes me a Libra. I'm to still be here. I'm glad to be able to do this with you all. I'm glad to share this this little thing that I like to do for fun. Sorry about that. With you all. I'm so blessed and just very, very excited to see what the next year, what the next 5 years, what the next 20 years brings. And, welcome to the show. It's just a solo run, just me today. So hopefully you all will bear with me and stay with me. And today, I think I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the lessons from my younger self. So some of the things that I learned as an adult from childhood. And the reason why I wanted to bring that up today, mostly, obviously, this is OG Dad, so I'm talking about my daughter. But specifically, for the last 2 weeks, we have been doing swimming lessons. And, I don't remember doing swimming lessons as a kid, so I can't speak from that experience. But as a dad today that has to, take his daughter to the indoor swimming center. And, this is the second week we're doing it. First week, I was a complete nervous wreck. And I had to sit there and really kind of process almost in real time what was going on. And I was just really nervous. It almost felt like the first day of school or something. And, I'm extremely nervous. I'm a little panicked by this whole situation of, bringing my daughter there and having her experience this thing. And, I'm trying to gauge her reaction from before we get to the pool. And, she's excited like all children are when, they get to experience something for the first time. But when we got there and, we're all changed and we're ready to go, I just remember seeing her face and she was scared. And I was scared, but I couldn't let her know I was scared. And then I look over at my wife and I think she was scared too. So I think what happened for me anyway, I'll only speak for me. I won't speak for my wife, but I think for me, it was, yes, I'm bringing my daughter to this, kind of insane thing. It's an insane concept if you think about it. Because the instructor, you get there and the moment we go in that water, there are no F's given with the instructor. Mostly because the instructor, she teaches all kinds of people from, little ones to, adults to people with disabilities. So for this instructor, it didn't matter, that the baby was uncomfortable. It didn't matter that she was crying and kicking and screaming. Like that stuff didn't matter. And, as a dad, as a parent in general, I think, we immediately want to assist with whatever is going on. We want to make sure, we can get through it and kind of work through those emotions together. But when you're doing this constant thing, and it's like 30 minutes long, but it's a really long 30 minutes where you're doing this thing to where you're just kind of enduring. And, she's, she didn't choose to go in a pool. This is me carrying her and me having to lift her. And, the instructor says, oh, don't be afraid to dip your baby and, stuff like that. So, I'm lifting, I'm doing all the stuff. And I got to tell you about what happened just the other day, but this last lesson. But, I realized in that moment, my daughter, she's so emotionally intelligent. When she saw that pool, it freaked her out. Every other child, they were cool. They seemed like they were in much better shape, like they had done this before, and they were so comfortable. But by the time that lesson started, I kid you not, every single other child in that pool was kicking and screaming and trying to get out. Oh, It was so reassuring. It was so reassuring knowing that, I wasn't the only one, that was, with a kiddo who was scared of this. But, I was taken back a little bit because, my daughter caught it before we even experienced anything. I think my nervousness was seeing her do this next, it's a milestone in life to learn how to swim, and like seeing that just play out in real time. And I think I was really sad and kind of scared by that. Um, just knowing that we're closer to, her inevitably, gaining that really independent spirit and just, moving away and doing all that stuff. So like I took this small little intrusive thought, not only the danger of it, but just, what it meant, as far as milestones were concerned. Like it was really bothering me that I felt that way. And I had to really try to dig deep and figure out what was going on, because usually I'm, when it comes to like anything that involves my family, my daughter, my wife, usually I look at the dangers of everything, right? Like I'm always just kind of weary of that. And there was some of that there, but I realized I was more scared of, sorry about that. My phone is making noise and I don't know why. I was more scared of just knowing that she will eventually dominate this, which she'll do most definitely, but she'll also, just move on from it. Like it'll be like the pool will be a non thing for her, and it's just another thing that gets her closer and closer to, just becoming that independent adult. And that was something that terrified me. Um, and then, the fear of like accidents and things like that happening. So it's just, it's just constant mix of emotions. Like in the very short 30 minutes, I think I was relieved by the end of that lesson, but like certainly the buildup was real, and I could see like kind of the fear on my wife's face, and you know, I saw that my daughter was getting nervous about it, and I was like, I can't show that emotion. I could certainly talk about it later, but in this moment, when I have these two other, individuals who, rely on me to keep them safe, I can't be afraid. Um, so, I sucked it up, no diddy. And, we did the lesson, and it was great. It was great. I actually ended up connecting with the instructor afterwards. Because she did mention, she worked with people with disabilities, and I work in that field, and we're constantly doing interviews and stuff like that to people that work in the area. So it was definitely an opportunity for me to connect and potentially have another person on a different podcast I actually produce. So I'm hoping that'll happen someday. Miss Holly, if you're listening or watching, I haven't forgot about you. It's gonna happen. But yeah, so that was last week, lesson one. Lesson two, yesterday, was a different different kind of, it was kind of fun in retrospect, but it was very mean spirited, and I got the point of it, and we inevitably had a good time with it. But yesterday, she gave us like these floating like little floating pads. They're like foam and they float and stuff like that. So she gives us these, and like we're playing these little games and stuff like that, and usually the games end with uh uh tipping the foam pad over so the baby just falls in the water. And it's just like, it's so mean. She was cool. My little one, she adapted. I think she adapted pretty good towards the end. Certain time around versus that first week. She, was in the water, and then I realized she kind of wants to do some of this on her own. We were on the shallow end. She's only but so tall. So we're on the shallow end, and I realized she's like, she wants to kind of go off on her own. Like she wants to figure this out. So, she's adapting, and she's always been that way. And I really appreciate, the fact that, my wife and I just give her that autonomy to just figure it out. It's, as long as it's safe and, it's something we can catch her. And if not, accidents happen. And hopefully she learned from that. But she definitely seemed like she was a little bit more comfortable with that water the other day. And I was just grateful to kind of witness that and um, be a part of that. So those are the things that I'm currently just kind of wrapping my brain around, just because it's so just it's bizarre, like the things we have to do to kind of teach our children to do things. You kind of just have to throw them in it. And some stuff you can sit down and teach and learn, and you can kind of walk through step by step. The other things you just kind of gotta let them do it. And like, they're fine, and that's usually what it is. And it's funny because people is like, something falls on the ground or something like that, and something will fall on the ground, and my daughter will pick it up, and it's like, oh no, it's fine. In the beginning, like, you're cautious, you wipe everything down and stuff like that. When she's almost 2 years old, I was like, she's fine. As long as it's not wet and gross, it's fine. She'll figure it out, and just dust it off. You'll be okay. But just thinking things about that. Just some of the stuff some of the stuff I told myself when I did become a dad. Some of the stuff I told myself, I'd never do. I was never gonna be that kind of dad. Never, and I would say, for the most part, I am that dad. We don't put our hands on our daughter, unless it's love. We don't, we, I try to go down to her level, like, physically, just so I'm talking to her. So, I'm not standing over her. I'm 6 foot. So, when we're talking, I ask questions, and, I ask about her day. And, when I say the things I swear I would never do, I don't know if I had those thoughts. And to be perfectly honest, I don't truly believe I had those thoughts when I was younger. I don't see myself. First and foremost, I never saw myself as being a dad, in general. And, to kind of pick up on some habits, and, like, oh man, I remember my dad, did that with me. And I get it now, you know what I'm saying? Like, some of the things you kind of witness when you're younger, you pick up on as an adult, and you realize some of that stuff is super dated, and we don't do that anymore. But I think some foundational things are tried and true, and they will always work. So I still got a long ways to go, because she is only 18 months. But we'll see how this roller coaster goes as time goes on. And I think what my parents got right with me is that I'm just kind of a critical thinker. And I tend to kind of go back and forth on things, especially when I have an idea for something. And I hope that my daughter kind of brings that same spirit to how she approaches things. And I think she does that. When she's now, her responsibilities are nowhere close to what my wife and I have to do to live and exist. But usually it just consists of moving this item over there, carrying this bag with that bag, or figuring out how to put on shoes. Which we are actively working on, because she should know how to put on her shoes. And she's trying to put on my shoes too, that ain't gonna happen for a while. But my parents were right. My dad said, and I think I mentioned this episode 1. My dad said, you will never sleep the same for the rest of your life. And that is factual. That is factual. I do not sleep the same. It is I usually check on her before I go to bed. Um, and now we're starting getting the blankets and stuff like that. So, I'm super cautious when it comes to that kinds of stuff. But I definitely don't sleep as much as I used to, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. Because I like spending time with my family. This was I'll talk a little bit about my birthday here in a little bit, but I'm always wanting to do that stuff. And it's been a bit of an adjustment coming up here and just kind of, figuring out how to, live and do this and do that because, you used to do so much with your significant other, before you had before you had a kid. And, you know, um, she was busy before my wife. I'm talking about my wife. She was busy before, but now, she's, twice as busy and we have a kid. So, those things, I kind of cherish, really want to hold on to just because, I don't want us to grow apart. I don't want the relationship between my wife and I to dissipate. And, I want my relationship with my daughter to be, positive and great. And I want us to do things. And, I really think about time getting away. And, I don't want time to get away. And in retrospect, it's easy to talk about what shoulda, coulda, woulda been. But we have to do those things, and I have to do those things too. I have to be proactive on a lot of those things, just because it's easy to let that stuff get away from you. And it's easy to just forget. It's easy to fall in routine and just exist. And I don't want to do that. I don't want to just exist. I want to be proactive in my marriage and with my daughter as well. So it would probably be, breaking that cycle. My parents are great. I love them to death, and they did attend a lot of things, but a lot of things they didn't attend. And, I distinctly remember, like my parents just taking like these separate vacations and me not really understanding why. I understand it now, but back then I don't think I understand it from a kid perspective. I definitely didn't understand it, but now I think I do understand it. Like, sometimes you need to get away and you need a destination trip, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. My wife went to France earlier this year, and I just went to Orlando. Excuse me. I went to Orlando. I visited some friends. I saw my sister. Saw some family. So it was, I had a fantastic time going. But the whole time you're away, you're just thinking about like, man, what are they up to? Like, like what shenanigans are they getting into? So, the whole time I was away, I was just sitting there thinking about them. And, it was nice to have the little getaway, but I just immediately wanted to come back home. It was like sickening to like be away. So Orlando was, I think that's what kicked off this show actually was when I was in Orlando. So yeah, it feels like it was so long ago, but we're only on episode 4. So and I did a show about about parenting away from the responsibilities of parenthood. Um but to go back to breaking that cycle, I do want to break those generational curses of just families that don't support one another. And with my birthday passing, I got so much love from my wife's side of the family. And my mom actually did call, my dad actually did call, my sister texted me. Um, but like it just like it was like times 4 on my wife's side of the family, and everybody's in the group chat and stuff like that. So that those were the things that I wish we had. I wish we were closer. And my parents did good raising us, but I don't feel like we were close. And I just wish we kind of had that closeness, like the way my my wife's family is. And like it matters when someone doesn't show up or they don't want to come or participate and stuff like that. And on my side it doesn't feel the same, and we're already kind of distant from one another. Like I think I'm the furthest north from everybody, and then my sister is the furthest south. So, you can imagine between mom, dad, brother, sister, and other brother, we're all like, kind of separate from one another. And, holidays kind of come and go, birthdays kind of come and go. And, we'll try and make plans to see each other from time to time, but it doesn't happen as often as I wish it did. I think I'm better at communicating to my parents um, than I was, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, when I was much younger. So my wife and I, I'm on my second marriage. But anybody who's listened to any previous things that I've done kind of knows the story. But um, when I was married in 2013, I was really young. Um, I wasn't all that close to my dad. It was like hate. Like, this is a very strong word. Maybe we were just in a disagreement, and the reason why was because he it felt like he had moved on from his family, and it felt like he had found another family and just wanted to fully integrate into that situation. And truth be told, I definitely felt left out, and I understood what was happening. I just didn't like it. So every time every time I had a chance to like cut him down or not invite him to stuff, I did it. Like, every time. You couldn't tell me nothing because we hadn't talked. And it was easy to not talk to him, but it was also easier to chew him out every chance I got. And I don't want that to be the situation later in life. So hopefully, it's not, hopefully there's no karma, and I'm, doing everything I can to nurture and cherish that relationship my daughter and I have. And I really do think about, that time that got lost between my dad and I. We lost about 5 years between each other, which is a really long time. And, I feel really bad about that. I think we did have a conversation one day, and this was after, my first marriage didn't work out. And, we sat down and we laid all of our stuff out on the table, and, we had a real man to man conversation. I really appreciated that. Ever since that day, we've, thick as thieves, we talk all the time. And I don't know where I would be in life if I didn't pick up that phone and be a bigger person about talking to him or not talking to him. So, Dad, if you are listening or watching, I'm sorry I let time get away from us, but and I'm glad that we are in a better position today than we were that time that all that time ago. So, if I could, talk to myself, my younger self, I would just really tell them to communicate to your family, communicate to your friends. You're not as alone as you think you are, because I really just kind of adopted this nomad life where I just moved, and it didn't matter because it was just me anyway, and no one will miss me. Um, and yeah, I had a lot of fun and I lived in some great places. But man, I really wish I could just tell my younger self to, have a conversation with your dad, with your mom, and tell them what's going on, tell them how you feeling. And I think I never talked to them and told them how I felt about things. And there's some big regrets about not doing that. But I'm glad we're in a better place today. I'm glad I can talk to them and visit them, and put FaceTime on them and show them the baby, and all those things. And I just wish we had that relationship. I wish our relationship was much closer back then. I think family sometimes can be difficult, but that's okay. Difficult is okay. You know, because you can work through them. Once you work through them, then things will really be okay because y'all are talking. So, younger self, if you're listening, talk, to your people, talk to your family. I would hope, I would hope that I'm doing you proud, as a man, as a father, as a husband. Am I what you expected? Am I not what you expected? I don't know. I close with saying that fatherhood is growth. It's healing and laughter. Think back to your younger self. Listeners, dear listeners, what lessons would you want to bring to your parenting style today? Um, so that's where I'm gonna leave it. I hope everyone has enjoyed this episode. If you are listening, what's been your episode so far? Is my question. I'm going to wrap it up here. This has been your host, the OG Dad himself, on the OG Dad Off the Record podcast. I hope you all have a great or into your week whenever you're listening. You can catch this show on all your favorite platforms because I got it like that. Good one. Take care. Be safe. Peace.